Setting up final grades in Blackboard Learn 9.1. Final grades are often calculated based on the sum of total points possible in the course. In this simplified example, I've got 3 discussions, 3 quizzes, and 3 assignments, each with their own point values that need to be summed up, and that sum is used to determine the final letter grade that the students receive. The way that the letter grades are assigned then is based on a percentage of the total possible points. So a student who earns 90% of the total points, or 270 points in my example, receives an A. Students who receive 80% of the points, 240, receives a B, and so on. So how can Blackboard help with this? The Grade Center in Blackboard can be set up so that one column displays the sum of the graded elements of the course, a total points column, and then a second column can be created that displays the letter grade that corresponds to that point value. So let's look at how this is done in Blackboard Learn 9.1. I'm inside the Grade Center of a sample course, and as you can see I have 9 columns to match the 9 graded items in this example that I set up. So there's 3 discussions, 3 quizzes, and 3 assignments. Now I need to create a total points column that will sum up those 9 columns. So let's do Create Calculated Column and select Total Column. And I'm going to call the column Total Points. I can leave the display name and the description blank. Primary display will be the score. So I want the column to display the total, the score, to me in the Grade Center and also to students in their My Grades tool. Secondary display here, I'm going to leave blank. Let me scroll down. Now I want all my grade columns included in the total, so I'm going to keep all grade columns selected. I could choose to select specific grade columns to include in the sum if I wanted to. And when I click over to Selected Columns and Categories, it gives me the columns that I can select if there were only specific columns that I wanted included in this sum. However, in my case, I want all grade columns included in the sum. For running total, I want to select No. As it explains here, by putting No, the system's going to equate an empty column with 0, and then 0 is used in my calculation. If Yes is selected, then the calculation is not going to display until there's a score in every column. Okay, so then you can decide on the 3 options for this column. I'm going to leave the defaults for these options and then just click Submit. Alright, the new column is created all the way over to the right. And as you can see, that total points column is now summing up the totals, the other 9 columns in this example. Okay, and if I hover my mouse over the total points, I see at the top here, it tells me that there's 300 total points possible in that bold area where it says points possible. Okay, so I want to make sure that that matches the total points possible that I've calculated in my course. So the next step is to assign a letter grade to each of these point values. In order to do that, I must first create my letter grade schema. So under Manage, there's a Manage button here. I'm going to click on Grading Schemas. And I see that there's already a letter grade schema that exists out here. It came built into my course. But if I look at that one, I see that it uses pluses and minuses that I'm not going to use for my letter grades. So let me cancel this. I'm going to need to create a new grading schema. So I'll click on the button, Create Grading Schema. I'm going to call mine Katie's Letter Grade Schema. In the description, I'll say I'll assign A, B, C, D, F to total points values, just so I know that this is mine. Now in the Schema Mapping area, this is where we have to assign percentages to grades. By default, I'm only given 2 rows here, So I'll click the arrow button under Insert Rows to add more rows, and by clicking that 3 times, I'm going to get 3 rows added. So now I can build the letter grade schema that I'll be using in my course. So for me, 90% to 100 is my A, and 80 to 90 is my B. So you can fill this out. Now on the right side, you'll notice we must also fill out the manual grade. So this means that if I manually enter an A in the field, what should the program interpret that as in terms of a percentage? So my A, I'm going to make it 90, 80. I'll just go down the line here. 90, 80, 70, 60, 50. So you'll want to set up your grade schema as you use it for your course. Once that's set up, I'll click Submit, and I'll see that my new grade schema is now listed here. Now that I've done that, I can go back to the Grade Center, and I need to create a second calculated column. So I'll select Create Calculated Column, which will also be a total column. I'm going to call this one Letter Grade. And again, I'll leave the display name and the description blank. Now, under Primary Display, I want the system to use that letter grade schema that I just created to display the letter grade. So now in my drop-down list, I should find this letter grade schema that was mine that I just now created. I'm going to select that one. And since it's the primary display, that's going to get displayed to me and the students in their My Grades tool. For secondary display, I'm going to choose percentage. And since it's secondary display, that percentage is not going to get displayed to the students, but I will be able to see the percentage. Okay, under the Select Columns area, I want to select the same columns that I selected when I created the total points column. Remember, in my case, I just kept all grade columns selected, so I'm going to keep that here as well. Again, I want to select No for calculate as a running total, and I'm going to keep my options in area. In this 4th section here, I'm going to keep my options set at the defaults. And now I'll click Submit. And when I scroll over, I can see that my students have been assigned letter grades based on the percentage of the total points that they earned in the course. And then as the instructor, that secondary display is what gets displayed in parentheses here. As the instructor, I can also see that percentage that they earned. So if I wanted to see which students were borderline between letter grades, between an A and a B, or between a B and a C, for example, I would be able to tell that based on the percentage that they earned. So that's how you can use calculated columns in your Grade Center to calculate and display total points and letter grades to your students.